we're looking to go to the tribunal relatively soon for a hearing, and council's officers have said the change we've made, and we've officially substituted these plans, that the earlier 4 two-stories are gone now. This is the request we're seeking approval for officially, and we're here now officially asking you to take your officer's recommendation to say the change we've made is a suitable change and that it properly addresses the concerns that were expressed so that you could feel comfortable changing your formal position. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. McKenzie. You may resume your position in the gallery. If I can please call in objection Miss Antonietta James.
Thank you, councillors. Sorry, you have to excuse me, I'm quite nervous when I will speak. On behalf of the residents in the area, there are a number of them here today. We don't see basically how the changes what our concerns were with the neighbourhood character of the street. So we don't understand how 4 proposed development of 4 units, 3 of which have been double-storey, how that's going to enhance the neighbourhood character of the street. We don't see how the rear is now being changed to a single-storey, how that, how that respects the character and the landscape of the street. I think what we're concerned about is that 4 units proposed to come up in this area. We're concerned that it's an overdevelopment. Why do we need 4? The closest train station being over a kilometre away, so we don't see why. I understand that we need to progress and residential developments happen, but why do they want to put 4 on this large allotment? All the housing around is note and see, they're all single dwellings on large allotments, and people that have bought into the area want to keep it that way. A lot of them coming in, knocking down old homes and putting up single one-dwelling estates on these properties. Our other concerns are we have one of the residents here today, Patricia Kilpatrick from 63 Boca Avenue. She's actually concerned about her 45-year-old gum tree that will now be compromised because of overhanging. So she actually is concerned with what's going to happen to this tree that's been in the community for years. So I guess, all in all, it's basically we're just concerned about 4 units going up in an area where it's not really needed. And if you have a look around in this area, you drive around through these streets, they are all single stories, and any new developments that have come in have a single-storey dwelling at the front, so concealing the back units that may be 2-storey. Whereas I can't see how 4 units in this zone is appropriate for this area. So that's really all that we're really concerned about. I guess I know that they've addressed the overlooking with screens and things like that, but again, they are concerned about people being able to see in their backyards. So, so I guess just compromising the character and landscaping of the street. We don't see how there's 4 units coming up, 3 of them being double-storey, how it's going to respect the nature and the character of the street the way it is now. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. James. You may
consider our objections. Thank you.
You may be able to take your position in the gallery. Councillors, questions at this point? Councillor Montana.
I just want to process question for the officers. Will this be required to go back to advertising, or it's being considered as an amended plan being submitted for us consideration, seeing it is slightly different to our initial refusal a while back?
Mr. Rolls.
Because the plans have been substituted at VCAT, VCAT will direct that advertising be given that they are different in terms of progressing from 2-storey to a single-storey, moving setbacks. It just gives the community the opportunity to view the altered plan and inform the view as to whether they think it's satisfactory or not. So yes, it will.
Other questions, councillors? Councillor Gregory.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I note that the new proposal, the new amended proposal, addresses two of Council's substantive grounds of refusal. But there are other grounds of refusal that have, I'm not sure to what extent that they have been addressed. And so could I get, from the officers through you, Mr. Mayor, to what extent have the other grounds of refusal been addressed by the amended application?
So these are the original refusal grounds. Yep, Mr. Rollers. I'm not sure if you heard the full extent of the question.
So, Councillor Greco indicated about the other grounds of refusal, whether they've been addressed or not. Page 10 of the agenda does walk us through in some detail, councillors. So the officer has indicated what they believe to have been addressed and what hasn't been addressed, and why we're still supporting the project as officers. I'm not sure we're going to need more explanations to. Were you referring to
well, in relation to page 10, if I can, through you, Mr. Chair, is that it talks about the application could comply with the standard. It doesn't say that it will comply with the standard.
That's correct, Councillor. It could comply because via conditions imposed on any permit. So, for example, we could impose a condition requiring a landscaping plan to address the deficiency there with landscaping. And as with integration with the street, clause 55, again, that can be addressed by a condition to better integrate the development with the street. So they can be dealt with by conditions, and that's what any tribunal would do as well. And what can be addressed by condition is then considered satisfactory, and it can't be addressed by condition, well, there may be an issue with the project because of that.
Other questions, councillors? If not, Councillor McCarthy?
Just a point of clarification. It's just on page 11, just in relation to these amended plans and the consideration of council's possible argument if it was to maintain a refusal. Where it says here on point D, subject to a condition, there is no unreasonable overlooking. I'm just wanting to understand the conditioning of that point in terms of where that brings us to. If I could just get some more information about that.
Mr. Ross?
So, for example, if the window isn't screened or it doesn't have a high sill, well, then it is an issue. The condition of an approval could require provision of a high sill, external screening device to be provided. Then it addresses the standard in clause 55, complies, and that's how the tribunal will view it as well. It can be, as I said earlier to Councillor Greco, it can be addressed by condition.
Is that currently conditioned?
And it is condition H on our amended recommendation for support. So unit 4 bedroom 2 window to be treated so as to comply with the overlooking objective of clause 55.
That's clause 1H.
1H. So
And just a supplementary on that point, the point about the landscape plan which Councillor Greco had referred to, is that been fully conditioned in that regard?
the condition, whether it's condition 4, condition 4, 5 and 6,
Yep.
all refer to landscaping.
And these are, can I just to clarify where we are at in the process then, has the applicant agreed to those elements? Are we going to be contested on that point at VCAT?
Mr. Ross?
We don't really know, Councillor. It'll be left in the hands of the tribunal to determine whether these conditions are appropriate or not. They could be amended.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, councillors, we do have a recommendation before us, unless there's an alternative.
Happy to move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Montana moves. Seconder?
Yeah, happy to second.
Councillor Walsh seconds. Councillor Montana?
I think the councillors who have got some concerns about this have had their questions answered by the officer in relation to the conditions which will hopefully address the reasonable refusal last time. and it is a substantial reduction in building mass in relation to the 4 double stories, 3 doubles to with 1 single at the rear, which is what were normally considered as supportable in the past too, Mr Mayor.
All right, Councillor Walsh.
Very briefly, Mr. Mayor. Look, I understand the concerns of the residents here. Could have gone either way, but I think in the past we've certainly supported applications of this nature, and there needs to be some consistency, and I think that the applicant has made some a fair bit of of ground has been given by the applicant. So on that basis, I'm happy to support it as well.
All right. Speakers against?
I'll be speaking against.
Councillor Ricker?
Just very quickly, I don't think even though there's been an attempt to try and address some of the concerns of refusal that the council put forward at its last decision, I don't think that they've all been adequately addressed. All the substantive issues of refusal that were previously put have been adequately addressed. Also, I note that whilst I think it's questionable whether the objectives could be met, let alone meeting the actual standards in relation to the outstanding issues. And the third point, I think, and this picks up on what the objector has said, is in relation to neighbourhood character. Here again, we have a situation where we're trying to put 4 dwellings onto the 1 block in an area that is substantially single dwelling allotments, and I think that clearly does not meet the neighbourhood standard requirements. So on that basis, I can't support the amended application.
All right, thank you, Councillor Gregor. Other speakers in opposition? If there are none, then I propose to put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Now, not without precedent in these circumstances, but it's been a while. And just by way of this, the issue is one of us signalling our intent at VCAT in terms of the change of the position, which of course has come by way of feedback directly from VCAT in terms of our current status. And it is with lament that on that basis I must vote in favour of the original position that I took, given that, and I reflect on the fact that I actually voted against this when it first came to Council, but given VCAT's intent that the broad outline that's contained within our report today is what they will accept, I don't think it would be appropriate to put the Council in a position where it's fighting in opposite to what the officers had negotiated with the developers at that point with VCAT's assistance. So with some lament, I vote in favour of the resolution. So ladies and gentlemen, what that means is Council has carried this particular report. In this circumstance, again, I'm assuming that there's still the process forward for the objectors to lodge a VCAT, 21 days as of today's decision. So we'll move to 5.2. 5.2 is 41 and 43 Separation Street, Northcote. Mr. Rudd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This application seeks approval for 12 apartment-style double-storey units, each comprising 2 bedrooms. As you note in the officer's report, it being assessed for parking purposes as functionally 3 bedrooms. On the account, there's a theatre room attached near the garage of each particular dwelling. There is no visitor parking proposed, and that's a significant matter raised in the report due to everyone's familiar with the nature of Separation Street. As set out in the report, all dwellings are provided with access to open space through a reverse living arrangement. 10 of the 12 units have a hybrid of a balcony and ground floor open space provided. It's quite a large site, Mr Mayor. It's 1,291 square metres. It does contain 2 allotments. The application has been advertised in the usual fashion. In response to that advertising, there's been 42 objections received. The grounds of these objections are detailed on page 16, and there's a response to through the officer's report to each of the grounds of objection on pages 17 and 18. They're taken through the report in detail. There are a number of deficiencies that are highlighted. Some particular concerns with the height of the rear, there's a slight back towards which exacerbates the height of the building, particularly to the rear properties. There's quite a poor response to neighbourhood character, and what's also reflective of that is a lack of opportunity for landscaping around the perimeter development due to the nature of the design. So the recommendation before you, Mr Mayor, is that the application be refused.
All right, thank you very much, Mr Rudd. Now, I have 3 speakers in opposition. 2, okay, that makes it easier. My ability to divide 3 into 5 minutes is a little bit more challenged than 2. So, of the 2, you might be able to help me here. I have Mr Alex Seeley, Miss Alex Seeley, sorry, my apologies, and Mr Nick Koyos.
I'm here, but...
So it'll be Mr. Susan. So you're Susan Fitzgerald? Yep, thanks very much. So if you may please take your seats there. And the monitor will help you, but you'll have 2.5 minutes each to make your presentations. Thanks very much.
My name is Sue Fitzgerald. I'm the Director at Alfred National Kindergarten at 34 Separation Street, Fairfield. I'm representing the community management and families and staff at the kindergarten. And pleasing to hear that objections have been raised, highlighted by the officers as well, but thank you for the opportunity to speak. In summary, some of the reasons why we objected to the proposal: the location of the development's driveway, the number of cars that would be entering and exiting the property, and even something as small as the number of rubbish bins that would be out on Nature Street, very close to the pedestrian crossing, that the children and families use a considerable amount when coming into kindergarten and leaving kindergarten. The planned car parking is insufficient for the number and size of the dwellings, which will cause increased parking problems in the neighbouring areas, and already there's an insufficiency of parking for residents and also kindergarten families. The number of cars entering and exiting and trying to park also will cause a build-up of traffic along Separation Street, which, as you know, is already a very busy thoroughfare. We already have difficulties with cars pulling out beyond buses and other cars that might be travelling too slowly to get past. And this cars that are stopping to go into the driveway and coming out of the driveway will also cause that difficulty. And our other concern is the demolition and construction works, which will impact on the safe access of families and children coming and leaving from kindergarten. We are very concerned about particularly the safe access for kindergarten children and families. As I said, the driveway being very close to the pedestrian crossing. The crossing was installed to assist children and families to be able to safely cross Separation Street and then proceed down to school, to neighbouring sites and to cars parked. So that the developed property, proposed developed property would greatly impede that safe access. The nature of the underground car park will also limit driver visibility of children walking families to the...
You may wish to summarise.
Yes. Our concern is also during construction periods, with children accessing coming to kindergarten, and also the possibility of dust, also possibility of asbestos presence when properties are being demolished.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms Fitzgerald. And now to you, Ms Seeley.
Thank you very much. My name is Alex. I'm speaking on behalf of the 2 homes that are directly at the rear of this said property. I'm at number 41 Raymond Street, which on the plans is 43. I live with my husband and my 4-year-old daughter, who also attends the Alfred Nuttall Kindergarten. Tim is here and he's the other rear property at 47 Raymond Street, and he lives there with his wife and his 3 primary age children. We're not opposed to the medium density development, but we're 100% opposed to this particular building application from Cornetta Partners Architects. As noted on the page 17 and 18, I don't want to waste your time and go over all the flaws of this application, such as lack of parking, over-ambitious request for 12 townhouses, and the cheeky addition of a theatre room, which we know what that actually means, the 3rd bedroom. Ms Sue's mentioned the bins and the parking. So I want you to know how it directly affects us, as the families behind. The townhouses are 8 metres high and they have 4 levels, a habitable basement, a level that is bedrooms, then the living area level, then the rooftop terrace, and it's said to be a double-storey dwelling. Well, I don't think that's a double-storey dwelling at all. We also believe that this development would need to be further than 3 metres back from our fence. Unit 9 is only 2.1 metres away from us, and that's just too close, and that's on page 23. The overlooking rear windows will see directly into our gardens. Some can see straight into Tim's bedroom, and there's no provisions for screening on those plans. Now, to do with the sun, this is also on page 23. Our home has a very small garden. We're at 43 on those plans. At 3 p.m. on a day like today, we would have 100% more shade cast in our yard from this development, which is totally compromising our quality of time spent outdoors with the family. And next, I'd like to argue that it's not a strategic opportunity site. It's not 500 metres from a train station. It's not 400 from a tram stop, and it's not on a strategic transport corridor. Separation Street's way too narrow to be one of those. And it's a decent walk from the activity area. So in conclusion, on behalf of 41 and 47 Raymond Street, our children, who have all been involved in the kindergarten, our amazing 42 neighbours who busily wrote their objections at Christmas time, I hope you can all agree that this particular application for a planning permit from Cornetta Partners is a greedy amount of dwellings in an unsuitable location and would happily like to be involved with their future plans for the site.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Walsh, if you may wish to resume your positions in the gallery. Okay, this one's pretty straightforward. We've never overturned a recommendation for refusal.
There is a question, if I can.
Yes.
And it's just, before we move to the recommendation, it's just in relation to the process forward, in relation to this, because it is such a huge cross that the officers have given the application. What the likelihood might be that the applicant goes to VCAT with amended plans, as we saw with the previous application.
Mr. Rudd?
Get a comment on that?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd say highly likely, and I think it's safe to assess that the applicant's got planning advice. They've been given a strong recommendation to amend their plans before proceeding to VCAT
And just
during the process.
And just a supplementary to that, all 42 objectors, I'm just checking, they will receive notification if that is the case, and they'll have the right to also be joined as parties to oppose this at VCAT if they wish.
Mr. Rudd?
Mr Mayor, I spoke to speakers this afternoon, and what we typically do when objectors, when we do have an application to appeal to be short enough, our officers always try and advise objectors that it's important that they become a party to the appeal. If they don't, there is a chance that plans can be amended and they may not be notified. And then the first they see is development emerging in the street. So it is important they become parties to the appeal. That way, because it's a process of the VCAT funds, the county council is sending out notices that will be VCAT.
Right.
I'm happy to second Councillor Walsh.
All right, so I'll accept that as a mover, Councillor Walsh, and yourself, Councillor McCarthy, as a seconder. Pretty straightforward. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's noted unanimously. Now, from today, though, as Mr Rudd advised, 61 days as of today's decision, the applicant has the opportunity to lodge with VCAT, and we'll see what transpires from there. But as far as the Council's decision is concerned, the application has been rejected. Thanks very much, Councillors. Now, on to 5.3, which is 80 80 Tyler Street, Preston, and Mr. Rudd, that's yours too?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to explain where this one sits in the context of the planning scheme, because it has to be assessed somewhat differently to some of the other recent applications. And for council, this is probably a landmark planning application because it's the first major development within the Northland Urban Renewal Plan area. It's an application that does enjoy recent strategic planning support from Council's Darabin Housing Strategy. It's also supported and reinforced in Amendment C138, which is the Darabin MSS and Planning Scheme rewrite. The subject land is also affected by Amendment C147, which is an enabling or delivery amendment for the Darabin Housing Strategy and Council's overall package of reforms that introduce the new residential zones where there are areas proposed as neighbourhood residential, general residential and residential growth zone. In the instance of Amendment C147, there is a planning scheme amendment that is through a review process and with the Minister for Planning for consideration and rezones this site to a residential growth zone. Mr Mayor, it's important I highlight the strategic context for this site, because if you go to the charts at the end of this report, you look at a strict view of clause 55 and how it's checked and strictly assessed against that. I'd say in anticipation of questions from councillors, that's your answer to virtually every area where there's a no put into not strict compliance, but where there can be compliance with conditions. And that's where it enables a departure from neighbourhood character considerations, because part of the Darabin Housing Strategy says that we're going to give primary consideration to neighbourhood character considerations, and the only time when we won't is when it's in the activity centres or if it's in a location not proposed as neighbourhood residential or general residential or in the residential growth zone. The application before you involves a development of 107 dwellings. 63 of these double-storey townhouse attached formats. There are 44 dwellings proposed in a 4-storey apartment, which is proposed to front Tyler Street. What's different about this proposal from many that the Planning Committee consider is that 52 of the dwellings are proposed as 3-bedroom and 11 are proposed as 4-bedroom. So it's predominantly a family housing development as opposed to a 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom configuration, which is commonly seen by the Planning Committee in the applications that are reviewed here. The proposal provides the full complement of car parking required for the dwellings. The exception and reduction is sought, however, for visitor parking. There's a shortfall of 6, there's 15 proposed, where the planning scheme requires 21. And the reasons for that reduction being supported are explained well in the report. Because of the size of the development, it's a site well in excess of a hectare, it's 1.4 hectares. There's a 500 square metre communal open space provided for the development. This combines with the provision for secluded private open space to each of the dwellings in a variety of configurations. Balconies and ground floor private open space. The apartment has balconies. The application has been advertised. There's been 9 objections received. The grounds of objections and the officer's response to the concerns raised are detailed on pages 43 and 46 of the report. Given the strong strategic support through Amendment C147, the Darabin Housing Strategy and the adopted municipal strategic statement, there is a high level of compliance with the future directions of the planning scheme, and the application for is recommended for support. There are a number of Condition 1 elements that are primarily dealing with some treatments proposed for the apartment complex to remove cages around and to improve the visual appearance. There is also, with the number of dwellings proposed, a few details and tweaks to address some of the interface issues with surrounding residential areas to ensure that their amenity is duly regarded if the decision is to support the application. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rudd. All right. So I have two speakers listed here, one for the applicant and one for the objector. So if I can please call for the application Mr. Ahmed Osman. And as mentioned earlier, Mr. Osman, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation. Yeah, you can. If you just pass it to the officers. Yep.
Yeah, that's just a briefing note, basically summarising some of the summary rules. As Mr. Rowe mentioned, the application is for a combination of townhouse development and a high-rise apartment building, which obviously has some high-level strategic support from the various elements that were mentioned. This primarily is at the instruction of council itself to the application to provide for that apartment building. Usually provided as simply a townhouse style development. We believe this is appropriate in response to those strategic documents. We acknowledge the objections that were received. That being said, we feel that the development appropriate response to those matters with respect to the potential development, as mentioned, it responds to the strategic documents that are in place, and it's identified as a strategic development site, and has a high access to a fairly high level of amenity and proximity to the public open space and an activity centre. With respect to traffic matters, again, I believe that's been duly addressed in the provision of the street for visitor spaces, and primarily that will be accommodated outside of the school peak period, so there will be sufficient room within the existing room to accommodate for that. We thank Council for the opportunity to work with them. I think it's been quite collaborative effort in order that we've got to this point. That being said, as summarised in the document, there's a few conditions that were sort of flagged as those would like to contest with respect to the removal of front fences to dwellings along Tyler and Cavalli Streets. Some of those dwellings actually provide living spaces or rooms to the frontages, and the removal of fencing will be a poor amenity outcome for residents. Within the longer term, providing a level of fencing will be more appropriate. Condition 4 also relates to the provision of food gardens within the communal open space area. Again, we acknowledge the intent by Council to provide for that, but longer term, whether or not that's really a practical outcome or whether that's going to be maintained for the betterment of the residents, this is questionable. And also, we've asked as an additional point of clarification that additional point be added into condition 1 to reflect Melbourne Water's advice to basically relocate some of the breaks between the units. So I won't take too much more of your time. That's all we have to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Osman. If you may be able to resume your position in the gallery. Now, speaking in objection, I have Mr. Alex Koutsoukis. Miss Alex. They don't say so. I do apologise. Yep.
I'm speaking against the development of 80 Tyler Street. I represent the residents who live in 72 Tyler Street, which is the neighbouring block. I'm glad to hear that the planners have been considering the planning policy provision 55 in reference to the visual impact of the building, because this is one of our main objections. With respect to the existing neighbourhood, everything else in the street is either 2-storey or 1-storey. The 4-storey building will have a huge visual impact on the street because it's a flat block of land, so there's no landscaping proposed to try and merge the building into the surrounding area. In fact, the 4-storey building will dominate the landscape, which is something that the Darabin Council itself has actually recommended doesn't happen in this area, even though it's been classified as a high growth area. In terms of the 4-storey apartment building in the middle of the complex, as has been mentioned, there will be privacy issues, both for the new residents in the new complex and for the current residents. The new residents will overlook the gardens and the washing lines of the current residents, and that's not a particularly appropriate situation to be put in. In particular, the other issue with the 4-storey building, which I'd like to draw your attention to, is that there will be a significant reduction in the amount of daylight that the current residents receive, and that indeed, according to their own plans, the 4-storey building will put some of the new 2-storey buildings into shadow as well. So I would argue that those 2-storey townhouses that are in shadow are going to be hard to sell. So that seems to be a bit of a strange planning decision. In terms of the planning policy 550301, the site setback for corner blocks requires that the site setback be the same for a new block as per any original pre-existing block. The site setback at 72 Tile Street is around 7 metres, much less is shown on the current plans, so that needs to be addressed as well. In terms of the infrastructure objective, and much has been said about the traffic in terms of parking and visitor parking, which is great, but what has been ignored is the fact that there are 2 schools in Tile Street already. Set down and pick up times are very busy, and there is a very slow light change at the intersection of Tyler and Albert Streets. There can be a backlog of at least 10 to 15 cars, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you realise that only 3 cars will get through every light change, we have a situation where if a lot of the new residents wish to drive their cars, they will have a traffic jam even getting out of the complex. And at this point, can I point out, there are only 2 driveways planned. That seems to be a little bit, perhaps not enough. In addition, one of the driveways comes out onto Gravelli Street, where there are the main power poles for Tyler Street. Now, it happens on a reasonably regular basis. Someone with a car bangs into the electricity poles and knocks out the electricity for the whole street. So for a driveway right there, we need to be reassured that our continuity of electricity supply will be maintained. In terms of the location, yes, it is, well, it can be argued as to whether it's close to public transport. It's a 20-minute walk to the tram, which if you're a single woman late at night is not very pleasant. The buses at Northland have been moved to the other side of the shopping centre, so they're now at the Murray Road side. So that now takes about 15 minutes if it's during the time that you can actually walk through the shopping centre. If you have to go around the shopping centre, there are very few proper walkways, you have to compete with the cars, it's not well lit. I would argue that even though the area might be zoned as a high growth area, people are still going to want to use their cars. We need to consider the traffic backlog in the street. Finally, in terms of waste disposal, I note on the plans there's only 2 places where there is communal waste disposal. So I don't know what everyone else is going to do in the new complex with their rubbish bins. That seems to be a bit inadequate. In terms of the construction site, as was already mentioned in the previous application, we have 2 schools in the street. We have the primary school across the road, and there have already been misses and near misses.
You may wish to summarise your points.
So, to summarise, the visual bulk of the development, I don't know how you can reduce the visual bulk of a 4-storey building. The site setback is not appropriate given it's a corner block, and there doesn't appear to have been due consideration for the traffic.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Koutsoukas. You may be able to resume your place in the gallery as well. Councillors, questions? Councillor Montana.
Just one in relation to, look, it's a fairly substantial 17C, but it clause 5545B21 overshadowing. It says it's within parameters, but I don't see a shadow diagram plan here. Where are we at with that?
Mr. Rudd.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got Mr. Rolls looking through the plans just to get the. There's actually, it's dealt with on page 45 of the officer's report, and it's not the full story that overshadows. As the objective said, there is shadowing internal, aside from that development. The shadowing issue is really with the 2-storey townhouses. And what the shadow diagrams show is when that shadowing occurs, it coincides with an existing fence. So the shadow cast isn't further than the existing 1.8 metre fence, based on the shadowing explanation within the report and the diagrams. I think it's fairly clear. So what it says is there has to be a certain amount of sunlight provided to adjoining secluded private open spaces between those hours and the 22nd of September. And the officer's assessment is that it's technically compliant, with particularly fence away, which is an existing arrangement. You've got to practically allow for that. So with that consideration, that's situation has been considered acceptable. If the fence wasn't there would be overshadowing.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Adam. Other questions, Councillor McCarthy?
Just I suppose a bigger picture question rather than some of the issues that have been raised. This site falls within our proposed Northland Urban Renewal area, and I'm just wanting to know, given that Council has recently adopted strategies in relation to the water-sensitive urban design of these sites in this precinct, and also the general sort of environmental and pedestrian performance of developments, how this measures up against those adopted strategies and intents, given that they're still sitting to some extent with either the Minister or they're not part of the planning scheme.
Mr. Rand?
Included in the process, we've got an ESD officer, a trained architect, who's quite qualified in looking at environmentally sustainable design components of development. That assessment's included in the report for you, and that looks at water-sensitive urban design amongst other features. You will see in the conditions there are a few changes and tweaks required to the plan to raise the level of performance. And they've not been raised as concerns this evening from the applicant that's spoken. There is, Councillor McCarthy is correct, it's an area for position. There's a combination of work being done specifically to the Northland Urban Renewal Plan, to the more broader environment and look at raising the bar in terms of water-sensitive urban design. And that's really to reduce the impacts of urban stormwater runoff, to provide a clean and cleansing. So there are some conditions in the permit that is recommended that would better address those considerations from the side.
All right, thank you. Further questions?
Well, it's just a sort of related question. I appreciate the answer. I suppose the council's intent with this whole precinct is for it to be, if it does go to a more intensive level of development, is for it to have a high level of pedestrian permeability, those sorts of things. So I'm just, I suppose, interested in, I know that it's been referred to the ESD officer, but I'm just wanting to know, can we actually assess the application at this stage in the context of council's aspiration for that precinct? There is a framework which council has adopted, which is only at strategic level, but I just don't see any reference to it here. It's the one, I've forgotten the name of the framework, but it's about any development, any major developments in this area actually achieving a zero water, zero carbon kind of setup.
Mr. Rudd?
We've actually got the application's also been assessed by Council's Urban Environment. We looked at street connectivity, the response to the public realm. There are reasons why there are conditions asking for the removal of fences and things like that to ensure that the public response to when the development is at an acceptable high standard. That also explains some of the changes proposed to the department. But in terms of the site's ability and the ability of pedestrians to move through the site, there is a generally gridded layout, and there is an opportunity for people to circulate through the site within the development to an acceptable level. And some of the changes proposed with the fencing and that probably assist that as well, facilitate that. We think there's quite a good internal road layout that actually does enhance the opportunity for yield to be achieved on the site, but it also is quite responsive to where we're providing backer blocks to backer blocks where there's existing lots, and we're providing fronts of homes to fronts of homes. And that's another reason why the officers have recommended the fence, the high fence, around the perimeter of the site are removed, so the public response is appropriate.
Just if I can, it's just, and I think I'll let other councillors have a go after this. The applicant has asked for the removal of 4F, which relates to the provision of communal gardens. I don't. If we were to adopt this application, I wouldn't support removing that. But I do wonder whether there is a set of words that strengthens the management arrangements in relation to communal gardens, and what are we basing the words that we've got here at the moment, the condition on? Is there something stronger we can put in place?
Certainly can be considered, Mr Mayor, and the aspirations of that condition have been sort of reflected through some of the policies and initiatives put forward that Councillor McCarthy's mentioned. And it would seem, it's Council has a well-publicised position to promote community gardens as a gathering and conversation point, and if there can be flexibility, the committee so mind, we'd speak with the appropriate department to ensure that those management arrangements are tight and hopefully work to a better manner for the applicant. But we've got a number of developments in Darabin where the developers are proactively encouraging and facilitating the community gardens.
I suppose that leads on to a second question. If the applicant is not enthusiastic, how do we enforce enthusiasm?
Well, I don't think we're going to be able to do that here.
Okay.
It'll be a VCAT mechanism, I suspect.
Well, is there a limit on construction occurring?
Well,
subject to that, because I'm just wanting to know, can we enforce this?
It depends on the outcome of the decision, but we wouldn't want to preempt it. Other councillors? Councillor Lyons.
Yes, I've got three questions. The first one goes to the side setbacks in relation, I think it's the second story element, against the building dwellings at the east, which seems to be the only, with the direct residents getting affected. Does this current treatment marry up with the 30-degree rules that we're looking at along the corridors of C137 and 3136, where there's an interface between residential and a more intense form?
Mr. Rudd.
Mr Mayor, very difficult question, not one I anticipated. It's hard to say what I can say generally though.
I'm normally pretty obvious. So.
As a rule, and we've stated in the chamber before, that res code is more restrictive than what's proposed along the corridors. Now, what's been provided here in the first floor arrangement is far more generous than what's allowed on the res code. Because one of the other considerations in res code is B17, which deals with visual bulk. And what that does is that provides a negotiation point for council to push the upper floor back to enhance the rear garden amenity for properties at back point. Now, my estimation is the second floor could go to technically confined around 2 to 2.4 metres. But in this case, it's beyond around 4.5 metres in the first floor across the board. I'm not sure if that's 30 degrees, but it's certainly significantly more than what the minimum is under this code.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rudd.
Okay.
The second question, Councillor Lyons.
Second one is regard to open space, and obviously it's good to see open space, common open space included in this. But I was just wondering to get feedback from the officers about the location of this open space. Obviously, it's near the 4-storey apartment, but was there any consideration that the open space would actually be consolidated at the front of the complex, towards the street, rather than hidden as an internal element?
Mr. Rudd.
Certainly, Mr Mayor, it was a consideration and a discussion point, but the open space is primarily for residents, and if it is put on the corner, it becomes general public open space, which which does change the dynamics of it.
All right. And your third question, Councillor Lawrence?
My third one was just regarding car parking. So it is, just to get some clarity, is 6 car parks, visitor car parks being provided, or it's a deficit of 6?
Mr Mayor, there's a visitor provision of 15 car spaces. The planning scheme requires 21. And the argument, and you'll note that it's been assessed by Council's Transport Planning Management Unit, and they look favourably upon that sort of concession due to the driveway crossovers. There only been a single one on Tyler and a single one on Valley Street.
All right. Well, councillors, we do have a recommendation here before us, unless there's an alternative being proposed. Councillor McCarthy?
I'll just add another question, actually. It's just arising from Councillor Lawrence's question. It's just in relation to this site at the moment, which looks to obviously present as a piece of open space in the community. I'm wanting to understand, is it currently actively used as open space by the community? Is it picked up as part of our open space register, and where does it sit, I suppose, in relation to open space provision more generally?
Mr Rudd?
Mr Mayor, this was former government land, was the Northern School for Autism. It's been through a public tender process. It's been sold privately. It is now private land. It is not private open space, public open space. Council, as a part of the Northland Urban Renewal Plan, has looked broadly at the provision of open space, and the considerations from that analysis is through Bell Street through to the Sunhill Shopping Centre. There is a good mix and a good combination of open space, both formal and informal.
All right. Well,
happy to move the recommendation, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Fontana moves. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it.
All right. Councillor Lawrence seconds. Councillor Fontana.
Well, look, this is quite an unusual application, Mr Mayor. As we've had explained to us, it's an incredibly large site, one which will also provide a diverse range of housing stock. And as we can see from the conditions provided in the report, there's quite a few there, and they're deliberate in order to ensure that there's high levels of compliance with the respective clauses, but more importantly, the ESD clause complying with that. And it's quite surprising too, the site coverage is actually less than 60%. You'd think something of such a magnitude of dwellings would exceed 60%, so I'm actually quite pleased that it is a little bit less. And as we're aware, the Northland Urban Renewal Project is earmarked for extensive intensification. And our housing growth strategy also includes this site as part of that intensification. Look, it's not a conventional application. It's as the officer mentioned, it's a landmark application, and one which we probably need to consider, because the alternative here is backyard landfill. We would rather actually consider this type of application rather than people's backyards being sold off to accommodate the shortfall of housing, which this area will eventually accommodate. And I'll make a comparison of this with Millers Hill. Those are familiar with Millers Hill, and bottom Miller Street, West Preston and North Thornbury. Something similar was considered on a smaller allotment with a fairly decent result, backing onto the reserve there. And if people look at the map on the landscape concept plan, it's actually quite a very good design outcome. And the active open space there isn't just open space, it is active open space, where there's a range of possibilities for residents to mingle, interact, and more importantly, appreciate that open space. But if you get the larger streetscape plan, you'll also notice it's very close to Solomon Reserve, so there's a bit of ample open space there for people to consider should they need to go there. Look, it's an unusual one, one that I think we will receive more regularly now in relation to our Northland Urban Renewal Project, and we need to consider these and ensure that the conditions applied meet the clauses in our plan scheme.
All right, thank you. Councillor Fontana. Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I appreciate objectors' concerns about densification as it's coming, and it's obviously a big change for the neighbourhood, but this is part of an area that is earmarked for renewal, and obviously it has a lot of buildings that will benefit from renewal. This site obviously is a vacated school, It is good to see that large communal open space is actually included in the development. We don't see that. Normally, four-storey developments are borrowing the public amenity of nearby parks. So that will provide an area for informal recreational or barbecue or something, I imagine. I'm certainly happy to see the clauses still in here to maintain the removal of the fences on Tyler Street. Part of the renewal process has to be to create safer streets in this area and have that front yard observation in the street. We do not want to see fenced communities that they do not add to the community safety of these streets. And we do know, I appreciate, I've walked through this area a lot, the safety issues here. So given all that, I did obviously ask some questions about the side setbacks on the eastern side, but I'm reassured by the officer's comments that we're actually getting a better protection than we'd get under other clauses if we followed them up. So all in all, I think I can confidently support this development.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor McCarthy?
Oh, look, just one more question. I have to ask this because I might have an amendment to move depending on the answer. It comes back to measuring the environmental performance of this as a development. I note that there is a 10 kilowatt solar array included. I'm wanting to know if, apart from what's listed in here, what conditions are available to Planning Committee to improve and increase the environmental performance, and I'm particularly looking at the provision of solar to dwellings. What's available to us that's enforceable in that regard? Because I'm just concerned that this will go through the steps process, and this room doesn't get a say in that. We should be going for optimum energy performance with a new development like this as part of this iconic area. So, what is available to us that we could add?
Mr. Mayor, we have to be extremely careful as a responsible authority around ESD provisions because, like it or not, the Victorian law has most of that based under the building legislation, which requires a certain energy star rating. And largely what we get through the steps process is a voluntary arrangement and agreement. But what we often find is that as officers we're arguing less in favour of that particular policy approach because the marketplace is demanding well in excess of what the legislation provides. So we've got to be very careful about providing specific conditions because we have been criticised by VCAT in the past by being too specific around our environmental requirements. But we have had endorsement and support for a broader and bigger picture approach through the steps assessment where those sorts of things would be advocated for.
But it's also to borrow the language from the previous Planning Committee, if I can, Councillor McCarthy, the notion of incorporating a secondary approach to our opposition that is not part of the core construct of the planning framework.
As far as we can go, is condition 10 really is eliminated. And to be more specific than that, there's a certain policy approach through that assessment. It does raise the bar above the legislation.
Yep.
The council's been really successful with. I would just suggest the committee we need to be cautious about being specific around that.
I'll take Mr. Rudd's advice in relation to that, but I would ask whether that then means that the energy performance is limited to what the current regulations require, which I think is a 6-star, if that's correct.
Mr. Rudd?
Mr. Mayor, that would be exceeded with compliance with that condition.
I would also just add, prior to inviting speakers in opposition, subject to tonight's decision, were it to go the way of the mover and the seconder. Having taken note of the position taken by the applicant's advocate, that were they to challenge the component associated with the open space, would be very interesting to see to what extent, as Councillor Lawrence rightly points out, the notions of borrowed amenity come into play were they to consider ditching that and suggesting that, well, there's a park within close proximity to it. It would be an interesting test position at any rate. So I would invite at this point in time any speakers in opposition if there are, because if there aren't, I propose to put it to the vote. Okay, I propose to put that to the vote. All those in favour? Against? And noted there, Councillor Greco in opposition. So, ladies and gentlemen, that the council has decided to approve the decision or the application in relation to Tile Street. From this point, 21 days is afforded to objectors to make their applications to the VCAT in opposition to it. So thank you very much. Now, our last item this evening is 5.4, which is 153 Wood Street, Preston. We might wait a moment, Mr. Rolls. I gather this one is yours. So just for members of the gallery to just leave at this point. We've never had a dog in the gallery before. That's all right. Over to you, Mr. Rolls.
Thank you, councillors. This is application for a medium density development consisting of 5 double-storey dwellings, each comprising 2 bedrooms. Dwellings 1 to 4 will have a reverse living arrangement, whereby the living areas are on the first floor and the bedrooms are on the ground floor, with balcony open space abating the living area on the first floor. Dwelling 5 will have a traditional living arrangement, living area and bedrooms on the ground floor level, with ground level open space. Each dwelling is provided with 1 on-site car parking space, with either a double or single carport, which are all accessed by the common access way. Councillors, this application was advertised in the normal fashion. A planning notice was displayed from the site, and notices were sent to appointed owners and occupiers. As a result of that formal advertising process, 18 objections have been received. The community have raised the following grounds of objection, and these are summarised: impact on neighbouring character, overdevelopment, double-storey height, off-site amenity impacts including overlooking daylight and visual bulk, traffic and car parking provision, removal of existing vegetation, location of site services, vehicle access and usability, reliance on reverse living, energy efficiency and external shading of windows, internal immunity of bedrooms impacted, precedent, use of medium density housing terminology and devaluation of neighbouring properties. Councillors, our assessment of this application is that it is not appropriate. We recommend that the application be refused based on the grounds you've noted on page 62 of the agenda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rolls. I take it that in view of what's before us, that is the reason why we don't have a speaker in objection. So I do have the applicant's representative here. So if I can please invite Mr. David Giovanni to come forward to the microphone.
Mr. Chair, just for you were looking down, but one of the members of the gallery put her hand up as regarding an objection.
I can't allow you to speak because the process is that you need to be notified.
Yes.
Yep. So.
I'd just like to answer that.
Yeah.
Not everyone received notice in writing, so how can they do it?
I mean.
I did.
I'm not sure, because normally the process is that they get processed through our offices to land on the paper before me, but I can't admit you as a speaker without it being formally done.
Yes, but how can other people object if they didn't receive it?
Well, I mean, I can only go on the assumption that the notices had been sent out in accordance to the normal process with regards to lodging objections with council, and that in furtherance to that, then asking to make representations during the course of a planning committee meeting. It's not without precedent that others who've been in a similar circumstance to yourself have asked to be heard at a late stage, but for the sake of consistency, I have declined them in the past because they haven't been formally lodged. So, on that basis, if I can please invite the applicant's representative, Mr. Di Giovanni, to come forward. Yep.
Good evening, councillors, and thanks for allowing me to speak here this evening. In looking at this development, councillors, just highlighting the locational attributes as a starting point. As we know, Wood Street has a bus route on it. This is a site that's relatively close to Northland Shopping Centre on one side to the east, and then relatively close to the Plenty Road tram going the other way. So locationally wise, it's a good site, and it's a site where policy, generally speaking, at the state level and local level, encourages more intensive developments. Now, the assessment of this development can't be just about the numbers. Yes, it's a 5-dwelling development, it's the first one in the area, but there's a difference between having, say, 3 large dwellings as you have in the property to the east, for example, compared to 5 dwellings that we're proposing here, which are very, very compact, affordable houses, and houses that provide an alternative means of living, which the Darabin planning scheme is promoting. The dwellings provide a car space for each home as they're required to. They provide a good livability for their occupants. They have good courtyards. They throw over a large balcony, or as in the case of the rear dwelling, they have a rear ground level courtyard there. There's a lot of good things here that shouldn't be overlooked. You'll notice at the ground floor plan, if you have that, we've just got the one vehicle crossover from the street. The front dwellings are detached from both side boundaries, so as you drive or walk past Wood Street, it looks like just a single dwelling. As you see, you've got that rhythm of spacing. We've got a site coverage of 44%, so again, it's not tight. The reverse living layout provides good recreational space for the future occupants of the dwellings. And one of the problems sometimes with reverse living is you don't have opportunities for landscaping. But if I could just take you to the ground level plan, you'll notice in the front yard there's an option to get 2 large trees within that fronting setback. Then if you look at dwelling 1, which is on the block to the east, but if you notice opposite bedroom 1, for example, down the driveway, there's a large landscape area there where you can get a good sized tree or shrub there. Likewise outside dwelling 3. And then outside dwelling 4, coming to the driveway, you've got a good garden area there where you can get landscaping. And likewise at the rear dwelling, which is the ground level courtyard, good opportunities for landscaping there, and in isolated spots on the western boundaries. So certainly, when you compare from an inspection or an aerial photo, levels of landscaping on adjoining properties, we've got more than commensurate with what we have in the area. If you look at the elevations, councillors, you'll notice from the elevations there, it appears from the street at oblique angles, but also adjoining properties as 3 larger dwellings. So it's well designed in that regard to reduce the bulk. Overshadowing is not excessive in terms of its impact on adjoining properties, and you'll notice from the officer reports that the application hasn't been supported and there's some deficiencies raised. We say to you that those deficiencies aren't fatal to the application. Every application has some shortcomings. Yes, it has some shortcomings, but we say in all it's not fatal. There's no overlooking unreasonable levels of daylight impact or shadowing, and it's a proposal that provides alternative forms of housing. It's affordable housing, entry-level housing in a good location, and sometimes to provide this level of housing we need to do something different, which is what this does. So we urge you, councillors, just to think outside the square. It's not conventional, but just think broadly. It is a proposal that works well and provide much-needed housing that's affordable in an excellent location. So thank you for letting me present tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jejabani. If you can please resume your position in the gallery. So, councillors, over to you. Councillor McCarthy.
No questions. The recommendation is for refusal, and in standard practice, I'm happy to move that we refuse the application.
Second that. Councillor Grigor, proposed to put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that's noted unanimously. So, as of this evening's decision, ladies and gentlemen, the applicant has 61 days to lodge at VCAT, and we'll see what happens there. But as far as the council is concerned, that application has been refused. So that concludes item 5, councillors, and the reports. We're up to 6. Other
move that the business items 6.1, 2 and 3 on the block.
Yep. I've got one question about 6.1.
Well, let's take the question first off, Councillor Lawrence, and then we'll proceed.
In regards to 6.1, list of scheduled VCAT appeals, 1091 Plenty Road appeal. Can officers let us know where we're at with that at all?
Mr. Rudd?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was a compulsory conference Thursday last week at VCAT, and at that particular compulsory conference there was agreement reached between all parties, including objectors, the applicant and council's representatives. There's been a confidential agreement reached, resulting in VCAT issuing consent orders for the amended plans to be supported. So that means the VCAT case listed in 6.1 will not proceed.
All right. Thank you very much. On that basis, if there aren't any further questions, can I take you, Councillor Lawrence, as the seconder?
Yes.
All right. Now, this is just to have consideration for items 6.1, 2 and 3 to be moved on block. So I'll put that to vote. All those in favour? And now we need a motion to move those. Councillor McCarthy is the mover. Councillor Walsh is the seconder. Propose to put that to the vote, that 1, 2 and 3 be moved on block. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our planning committee meeting. Thank you for coming.
Very good.